Yes. So again, the non-compliance issues, there was no Form 100. Correct. 040 payment authorization attached. So these documents were not attached. These forms.
Council, can you, what page are you on?
Page 25.
25.
Yes. Are we all together?
Yes.
Yes. So again, total disregard of the single sourcing method used to procure fuel at the value of 17,103. Is that correct?
Correct.
We have as well the repetition of the management's response, where in fact they highlighted that it is above the threshold, which is word for word with respect to the previous findings. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now on page 26, goods procurement of stationaries.
Council, let me just find out from Mr. Sanyang. If you look at the point on the non-compliance, that is, there was no Form 100. I believe that was an error. In brackets, you have the national requisition, which means there is an error in referring to the wrong form in this instance. The reason why I'm highlighting this, for this, it may be acceptable, but where repeatedly a particular form or legislation or reference is made and is wrongly made, there are two things that you can impute. It's either it is negligence, deliberate, or fraudulent. Three things. That is what you can impute from. All right? I just wanted to make it clear. Okay. Because here, you could see that it is clearly written that it is a requisition form. Yes. And if they mention Form 100, you will know that this is a genuine mistake, a type of mistake.
Correct.
Because it has already provided for you clearly that Correct. This is it. Correct. All right? So that is why, when you were explaining that it might perhaps some error, I did not buy that argument. All right? Correct. Thank you. Yes, you may proceed.
The procurement of stationaries, 26, $40,000. The contractor Ibrahim's printing, single findings, purchase order was not raised by the end user department. The procurement was above the threshold. There was no evaluation report by the contracts committee. There was no delivery receipt as stipulated. The supplier was not registered with the authority as stipulated in the Act. Now again, this particular procurement, they did not abide by the rules or the requirements, correct?
Correct.
You have the procurement of construction of 2 toilets, $87,000. The contractor Bubakar Job. The method RFQ, non-compliance, purchase order was not raised by the end user department. There were no minutes of the contracts committee. The quotations were not opened in a register of Form 004. Specifications were not developed for this procurement. There was no inspections committee to inspect the goods. There was no bill of quantity, BOQ, developed for this particular procurement. And there was no examination and acceptance committee. Again, none of the rules or requirements were followed. So they responded by saying the PO will ensure all required documents will be attached to each transaction. That they will ensure that the required documents will be attached to each transaction, including minutes, specifications, purchase order, and evaluation reports. The amount involved was, so this is again a repetition, exact response you will have. In fact, word for word. It's a copy and paste, word for word response you will have in most of the management response. Is that not the case?
Correct.
Before you proceed, Mr. Sanyang, is it not an inconsistency? In bullet point 5, when the team says there was no inspection committee to inspect the goods, because the procurement that was done, it is for services, I believe, not for goods.
Yes, it's works.
Yeah, it's for not goods, right?
It's for simple
Works,
works.
yes.
Works.
Works. So it's not goods, right?
Yes.
So it is wrong.
So here, exactly, to inspect the goods,
Yes.
instead to inspect the construction,
Works.
probably, or the works, yes.
Okay. So to say that the referencing is also wrong with respect to the provisions.
So to inspect the goods is wrong.
Are you getting me?
Yes,
And the provisions that have been highlighted are also wrong, right?
yes, yes.
Okay. Yes, Council, you can proceed.
Now, with all the findings that we have discussed for the year 2022, which is just the same with 2019, 2020, and 2021, how will you say, or what is your opinion with respect to the compliance standard for Kerewan for the year under review 2022? Mr. Sanyang?
Non-compliant.
Mr. Jaite?
I concur.
So the conclusion that they are 53%, which denotes mainly compliant with Gambia Public Procurement Authority, will be very inaccurate. Is that the case?
It is inaccurate.
We have exhausted the discussion with respect to the compliance review for the year ended 31st December 2022, Madam Chairperson, for Kerewan Area Council, and that is the last for Kerewan Area Council. Are there questions from the commissioners?
Mr. Sanyang, what is your overall assessment as to the findings of the team when it comes to the activities of Kerewan Area Council?
Actually, like I said the last time, the citations may be wrong, but the facts in terms of non-compliance may remain the same. So my assessment, overall assessment will be that councils are not complying with the provisions of the law in terms of their procurement transactions.
Thank you. Yes, Council.
Any other question from the commissioners before I proceed? Now,
Commissioners, do you have any questions? No questions.
Now, Madam Chairperson, we will discuss Janjanburi Area Council compliance review reports. We will start with the 2019, for the year 1st January 2019 to 31st December 2019, Janjanburi Area Council compliance review. Please guide yourself through the mentioned or the aforementioned report. Are you there?
Yes.
Please tell us the members in attendance in the entry meeting and exit meeting on page 5.
They include Sambali, CEO, Buba Mane, Finance Director, Maria Tukande, Procurement Clerk, Dauda Sama, Finance Manager, and the rest are GPPA review team. members.
And the review team comprised of Mamadou K. Jallo, Assistant Operation and Policy Officer, is that correct?
Yes, Mamadou K. Jallo, Assistant Operations and Policy Officer, Babkar Seka, Compliance Assistant, and Barabos Mendy, Compliance Assistant.
Is the Barabos Mendy the same as the Barabos Pierre Mendy?
Yes.
And the key documents reviewed were the purchase requisitions or payment vouchers?
Correct.
Direct procurement, evaluation reports, contract agreements, requests for quotation?
Correct.
Now, the staffs directly involved in the review for 2019 for Janjanbureh, you on page 6, Mr. Samba Lee.
Correct.
That's the CEO. Mariatou Kande, the procurement clerk.
Correct.
Buba Mane, the finance director, and Ibrahima Janko Sane. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now let's discuss they said all files were given to the reviewers. They were administered and recorded as recommended by the review methodology to enable the reviewers to give a total summary of the value of procurement. So again, in this particular procurement, the team had access to all the files that form these transactions or the procurement transactions for the year under review. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Now you have a table that shows the total procurement proceedings and their values. Can you run us through the table?
The other procurement methods are not shown, and they started with the single. And these are 681 transactions or single sources amounting to 4,461,699.81. Request for quotation nil. So all the procurements were single source as per the findings and the report.
So on page 5, where you have the documents or the key documents reviewed, here you have 0 transactions for request for quotation, but then they outline that they reviewed request for quotation documents. And then you have 681 transactions with respect to single sourcing, but they outline that they reviewed documentations with respect to single sourcing. I'm not sure whether you have seen or you have noticed.
Yes, I have seen what you are talking about. Yes.
Yes. So now, when the organogram, it seems to really, I'm not sure whether you can read it. The organogram on page 8. The way it is printed, one cannot really read through it to know what the organogram is with respect to Janjanbureh Council for the year under review.
You are right. The writings are not clear, and it's very difficult for one to read.
All right, we will come to that. On page 9, what are the non-compliant issues we have with respect to SPU?
We observe that the SPU is directly reporting to the Director of Planning and Development, which we found to be non-compliant to the recommendation of best practices.
So, for the year under review for 2019, Janjanbureh Area Council, you find one strange practice that they have there is that the SPU being under the Director of Planning. In most instances, you will see that even though they do not comply with the requirements of the law, but then by having the SPU under the Director of Finance, as far as you're concerned, it should be under the CEO, that is the administrative head. But here you have it under the Director of Planning. Is that correct?
Yes, it's according to the report. Yes, it's under the Director of Planning.
Now, the implications are as well the same with respect to not having the director of, the SPU under the proper directorate. He said that the procurements may be individualized for personal gains, accountability and transparency are not assured, causes the use of wrong procedure, which can lead to wrong award decisions, and the value for money cannot be attained. So this is the same finding that you have had in fact most of the area councils.
Correct.
When they have the SPU situate under a particular department as opposed to it being under the CEO.
Correct.
Now, let's discuss a bit with respect to the functions of the contracts committee and vis-a-vis and the accounting officer as well. On page 10, what were the findings on page 10 with respect to the functions of the contracts committee?
There is no evidence that the procuring organization has established a contracts committee in accordance with the Gambia Public Procurement Act, Section 47.3, 49, and the Gambia Public Procurement Regulation 18.2. However, the review team was informed that the following members have been appointed members of the contracts committee, but they did not provide any formal appointment of the contract committee as required in Section 47.3 and GPPR 18.3.
Okay. Now, before we proceed to who the members are,
I just want Mr. Sanyang to take us through the first heading on the report at page 10, which has the heading Selected Committee of Janjambure Area Council. Why I want you to expatiate on these committees that the report is highlighting that they found when they went for the review is whether the councils had difficulty in understanding the difference between an SPU and a finance committee. Because if you read the paragraph, it is telling you that the committee found, the review team found this committee set up by the council. And what I want to find out, if it is provided for in your records, whether they were not mistaking the finance committee to be the SPU?
I'm not sure that it is a mistake on their side. I think for them they have established different committees based on their operations, but that have nothing to do with the procurement,
So in other words, you are telling us that they knew what they were doing, they decided to set up their own committees, not to comply with what the authority has provided for them to do.
I'm sure they knew what they are doing. No. I'm sure.
That is the clarity I wanted, because it clearly indicated the committees they have set up. They said they interviewed the CEO and the chairman, and they discovered that in all these committees, the procurement officer is not involved, and also the budgetary officer is in the finance committee only, meaning they conduct their activities within themselves only.
Correct.
There is a reason as to why I asked the question, because there are some municipalities that believe that, you understand, they have a right to set up their own committees without regard to what the law says from the authority.
I think they have their rights to set any committees
yes.
as per their operations,
yes.
but when it comes to procurement,
yes.
the rules are clear and all procurements must be guided by provisions in the Public Procurement Act.
All right. Council?
So again, I was coming back to that point. for a better understanding, when you said that they have different committees which consist of the councillors only, and you have in bracket the finance committee, establishment committee, and educational committee, why is that a problem?
It is not a problem to establish committees. If a committee is going to be involved in public procurement or procurement, obviously the law clearly dictates that all procurement transactions should be conducted by SPU.
But they have a contracts committee that involves one Mariatu Kande, whose designation is the procurement clerk.
Correct.
So, again, where is the problem? I still don't understand where the problem is.
The law have not defined, the public procurement law have not defined what other committees would be, what the members would be, and so on. But what I am saying is, if any committee is to involve in public procurement, obviously the composition and the representation must be as provided for by the Act. Well, so they have the right, like I said earlier, they have the right to set various committees because they have their own strategic plan, they have their own activity plans and the like. But when it comes to procurement, their procurement transactions in terms of who should conduct it and so on should be guided by the Public Procurement Act.
These committees are already, its establishment is already dictated by the Act, the Local Government Act and regulation. What I'm trying to drive at is the fact that if you look at the second limb of the paragraph, it states, from our interview with the CEO and the chairman, we realized that all these committees, the procurement officer is not involved, and also the budgetary officer is in the finance committee only, meaning they conduct their activities within themselves. So we want to have a summary of what this statement means.
Activities probably may mean their development activities, but if the activities involve public procurement and they are not involved in the procurement officer, it's a violation of the Act.
No, the involvement of the procurement officer and the demand that the procurement officer will be a member of all these committees is quite different. You will see that when you say that the procurement officer should be part of the contracts committee, it makes sense. Of course, the SPU, the channel who you are supposed to be answerable to. Is that not the case? I think where the problem lies is when you have procurement being done in the, with the exclusion of those who are qualified, that is, members of the SPU, to conduct procurement. Is that not the case?
Correct.
Yes, so again, when you look at the composition of the team, the contracts committee, you have the procurement clerk there, but then their appointment is not formal.
Composition of the team. Where do we
Same
have?
page, same page.
That would be page.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yes, the table that shows the members is the team.
Now turn to page 11. Non-compliance 3.3.3, the reports.
Yes, the contracts committee did not ensure that monthly reports are submitted to the authority, and two, the contracts committee did not ensure that the approved thresholds by management are adhered to.
And the implications thereto?
Persons can easily avoid responsibility when misprocurement is detected, since no member was formally appointed to carry out their responsibilities. And two, accountability and transparency are not assured. And finally, members can pull when there is a misprocurement.
Okay, Council, I just want to be clear, Mr. Sanyam, that, sorry to take you back to page 10. So it will be correct to assume that any activity that has been conducted by any committee, whether it's called a finance committee or otherwise, and was involved in procurement, that procurement is illegal because it is not in compliance with the Act.
Now, as we have discussed,
no,
requisitions should always come from the end user.
Yes.
They can have the procurement.
Yes, just hold on. We understand the provisions of the Act, the Local Government Act, gives mandate to the councils to set up their committees.
Good, yes.
Various committees.
Right.
I haven't listened to what you have said in answer to his question.
Correct.
You have said, I just want it to be very clear on my head, that they have a right, which you are correct to say, because it's provided for in the Act, for them to set up their committees. So my statement is that, would it be correct to assume that if they set up these committees and if they conduct activities on procurement, would it be correct for them to have engaged in activities of procurement without following the GPPA Act?
It's wrong.
That is what I wanted you to confirm. Because you are aware that councils have set up committees, and those committees were involved in procurement without following GPPA rules.
It's a wrong act.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, there's a distinction here.
Yes.
And your position is, in fact, what I was trying to arrive to. So that when you read the, on page 10, Selected Committee JAC, that is the Jabure Area Council, the way it was being written will suggest that the procurement officer has to be a member of all these committees. Now, the idea is where you have these committees, that is not necessarily the case, but where you have these committees engaging in procurement without following due process, because at the end of the day, the process is, even if you are the end user, and you please, you can, don't hesitate to correct me, even if you are the end user, it still has to be approved by the contracts committee, which the procurement officer should be a member of, so that you cannot start and end procurement in these committees. So whatever procurement they conduct, whether in the finance committee or the establishment committee or the educational committee by themselves, and it ends there, then it will be a violation, total violation. So I agree with you entirely.
Exactly, because
yes,
it seems there are some councils that are using it synonymously.
Of course.
The committee with the finance committee.
Yes.
That they have a set up.
Yes.
In their own councils.
So that is what.
That is why I wanted him as
yes,
the expert.
So
to
that is
distinguish and explain.
absolutely true. That is what the writer tried to explain here, but could not. So that when you read it, it will suggest that the procurement clerk should be a member of all of these committees. The idea is, in fact, these committees cannot carry on procurement entirely from start to finish without following due process.
I agree with you, Council.
Yes.
Now, and the correct committee, which is the contracts.
The contracts committee to approve it. Yes.
I agree with you, but suppose the procurement officer is not part of those committees. Those committees are end users, so whatever decision they take in terms of procurement should, of course, go to the procurement officer to ensure that the right documentation is in place, and then forward it to the contracts committee for a decision.
Absolutely, that's what exactly we are saying.
Yes.
In the Janjambore Area Council. Only one individual, is that correct? Page 12, okay. Ms. Mariatu Kande.
Yes, page 12, not, okay, it's on page 12, yes.
Yes, qualification, level 2.
Yes, GPPI level 2.
Ongoing studies, GPI level 2, and training. So what is the qualification? Is it an ongoing studies, GPPI level 2, or as at the time of the review, she had already completed the level 2 training?
At the time of conducting this review, she was ongoing. Yes, the training was ongoing, but she has completed now.
Now, non-compliance issues with respect to the specialized procurement unit.
The SPU did not send their monthly reports to the authority for the year under review.
Yes, so this already granted. The second one is the...
There are
councillors
that are handling procurement within their wards, which is not in line with section 50 and 51 of the GPPA Amendment Act.
Now, where you have this kind of situation, where you have councillors, first, please explain in the simplest terms what you mean by councillors handling procurement. And then we will now come to, I will now ask my follow-up question.
This may suggest that councillors are doing their own procurements without involving the procurement officers, but the arrangement probably may have been done by the council's management and the like. So this is straightforward. But
how is that? No, it is not straightforward. I want to understand, because apparently you will have a finance department, you have an SPU, that is a specialized procurement unit, you have the contracts committee, but then you have the councillors. Of course, we know these are usually elected or nominated members, generally. Yes. So now, if they are conducting procurement in their own various wards, how do they go about it? Where do they get the funds?
Actually, what this may suggest is like an activity being identified at a ward. The councillor will collect quotations. The councillor will, of course, identify, or they come together and identify a supplier and make recommendations for payment, and probably invoices raised, and this will be forwarded for payment without involving the procurement officer. And I assume that because the procurement officer is not involved, obviously I think it will feature. The documentation will not be in line with what the law provides for.
So again, what you have here is individuals that are outside the procurement unit, and to be more specific, councillors, either elected or nominated, will raise or single-handedly handle procurement transactions.
Correct.
And now come to the Director of Finance to secure funding for the said procurement.
Correct.
Without following any process. But correct. Should that in fact be the case?
That is what the report
exactly. That is exactly what it is talking about. Should that in fact be the case? Yes. Will any competent Director of Finance allocate funds for such a malpractice? Or should they do that? Yes.
Council, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I am not clear on this issue. I want to be the report. Council, can you put me through where in the report that it says the councillors initiate procurement and conduct procurement without the involvement of the procurement officer? Because you just told us that the procurement officer is a member of all the committees.
It's not a member.
It's not a member.
Yes.
Of the committees.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I got it.
It's not a member, and in fact this transcends the committees. Here now you have two scenarios. First, In fact, this is the more reason why the team were trying to, this is what they were trying to explain in, on page 10, which they didn't explain clearly, but we have now had the understanding that you have in the procurement being done either in the finance committee, establishment committee, educational committee, entirely, until they secure the funds for whatever project that they want to engage into, without engaging the specialized procurement unit. You see, it's one thing you have the specialized procurement unit to flout all the rules. You understand? When you have a basketball player throwing shots and missing them, much more better, perhaps, than you have someone who is drafted from, let's say, a footballer being brought to play basketball in the league, and then just, you know clearly this is just gross negligence. Is that not the case? Here you have, you are prone to corruption at an unimaginable level, because you cannot conduct procurement at the level of councillors and it being approved. What I mean by approval is funds secured by the Director of Finance or the Finance Department for a project that has not gone to the SPU. So you have that on page 12, where it says that non-compliance. There are councillors that are handling procurement within their ward, which is not in line with the relevant laws. So my question is on that: should any Director of Finance, any competent Director of Finance, grant any request for any form of procurement from any councillor, apart from aside from it going through the SPU?
The practice is totally wrong.
All right. Now, where you have this situation and it keeps on occurring, what would you think probably is the cause of having such a practice in a particular area council?
One, there could be ignorance of the law, which I assume is not the case. But two, negligence or disregard to the provisions of the Public Procurement Act.
But let's say, let's please come through.
Quite honestly, it's negligence, either negligence or corruption.
Or corruption, because if you want to give a pass to the councillors, let's say yes, they are negligent. Let's assume they are negligent. Let's assume they don't know procurement, and so they feel they can raise vouchers and so on and so forth, and then come and claim that they need a fan, they need a toilet here and there, back and forth. But then the finance director, the finance department, should they not be in a better position to know that that is not the procedure?
They should.
So if they are to approve that, they have to approve these transactions. Not even once, but we have seen it is endless times. If they are to approve these transactions, it can only mean corruption, that they are in collusion with these councillors.
Correct.
Now, again, it seems as if the point is being repeated, the same page. We observe that councillors were conducting procurement in their wards without presenting procurement items, received invoices. So you see, there are no documentation to back any of their demands in relation to whatever they may come up with falsely to kind of suggest that they need a fan, a vehicle, here and there, back and forth. So monies are just being approved. You see, the point is there are different, what we have learned from this procurement compliance review is that for every area council, they have a mode of operation. We have seen a particular area council wherein the finance director will use council's funds and put these funds in his personal accounts, and now be going back to the banks, understand, to secure loans or overdrafts. Or situations where, in fact, the Director of Finance will go into the markets also to collect revenue. So this is another form of corrupt practices happening in the Janjanburi Area Council.
Yes, Council.
Yes.
The last point on page 12, you have indicated that you recommended to the CEO of the area council to enter into a framework contract for the procurement, but you realized that the recommendation was not adhered to. At this point, you are aware and you knew that this particular CEO just didn't want to comply. So in that circumstance, what should have been the responsibility of the authority?
Actually, we should have taken actions as based on the powers vested on us as an authority to regulate.
And you failed to take action.
But let me also clarify that, yes, we have not taken action.
All right,
anyway.
thank you. Yes, then you can explain.
I also want to clarify that entering into a framework agreement is a suggestion. It's not mandatory that it makes work easy and so on, but it's not mandatory that institutions should enter into a framework agreement. Yes, you are right, we have not taken any action, and that is a sort of a weakness on the authorities' side. Anyway.
What would recollect, it is part of your evidence to this commission. You have, under what circumstances and what types of goods and services that you recommend for POs to enter into framework agreements. You told us that, right?
Yes, yes.
So you now coming to tell us that it is not a matter of
what I said was we meant to make work easy for them. For example, goods
but even that recommendation is backed by what is provided for in law. You said if somebody is transacting on fuel, for example, you are better off doing a framework agreement because of the continual demand for it and the use of it. And based on procurement rules, that is the advice. You are not advising this out of vacuum.
What I am saying is the provisions does not say that institutions shall enter into
yes, we are all saying the same thing. But what I'm saying is
institutions may enter into a framework agreement to make work or life easy for them. So if they don't choose to do so, yes, unless the procurement transactions are conducted wrongly, but if they don't and they are conducting transactions the right way, it is not non-compliance. But in this case, I'm not saying that in this case their transactions are compliant. They are not. But I want to clarify that entering into a framework agreement is not mandatory.
We understand that. But it is a reason, because it is the antecedents of the activities that made your team to recommend that. Is that not correct?
Correct.
Yes. Thank you. Continue.
Yes. For the framework agreement, before we proceed with respect to whether it is mandatory or not, granted, it is not mandatory. That is why you recommend it. Is that not the case?
Correct.
But now, what is a framework agreement?
A framework agreement is an agreement between a supplier and a buyer.
Yes.
In which the supplier will agree that a certain kind of good or services
yes.
will be supplied based on an agreement that they must have entered into in terms of time for delivery, in terms of quantity to be delivered, and all the other terms and conditions.
And why is that recommended for transactions like fuel and commodities?
It is recommended life easy for them. Simple. each of these transactions, you must request with all the forms and other things should be observed. You must also ensure that the transactions or all the forms are completed at each stage. So, but in a framework agreement, you look at the total amount and then subject it to competition. At the end of the day, whoever becomes the winner, you agree for the item to be supplied at different stages. So that will save you time to avoid completing forms all the time, having meetings all the time, making requisitions all the time.
And also value for money?
Yes, yes, it can.
You also avoid having situations where procuring organizations will split procurement, splitting.
Correct.
Is that not the situation?
Correct.
So that when you spend $2 million to procure fuel in a particular year, but then you do it in piecemeal to make sure that it all falls within the single sourcing threshold, which probably will be 20,000. You now start to procure fuel at an amount of 15,000, so that when the reviewers come, they realize that all this single sourcing is within the threshold. But as an expert, you will know that these are all one transactions. And they can be one transaction. Even if it is made in one transaction, it will probably be more than the amount, the threshold for single sourcing. And so the best would be, like you said clearly right now, to subject that to competition. We know we need fuel at a certain amount. We have a framework agreement, but apparently the entire process we will have the most deserving supplier. Is that not the case? So that we engage with the most deserving supplier to supply fuel at a certain amount of money in a particular period. Is that not the case? So we have discussed this time and again. So it may not be mandatory as per the wordings may and shall, but the chairperson is just trying to exactly outline the fact that it is being recommended by the experts, that is you, because you know fully well that the procurement organizations will adopt a procedure to kind of be under the radar. So all you see is that they are complying with the regulation. For single sourcing, they are always below 20,000 dollars. But then the amount of fuel spent on during the transaction with jar oil is $2 million in 1 year, or let's say in 6 months. So why not as well engage in framework agreements, get the whole process in a competitive bidding, have value for money, and that's it.
I agree, Councillor.
Exactly. So the recommendation here is not only a mere recommendation, but it's a strong one. It's in fact in the other way around, trying to say that we know you are engaged in unlawful activity in a smart way, but we recommend that this should be the appropriate way.
Agree.
Exactly.
Is this framework agreement provided for in the Act?
Framework agreement, yes.
Can you refer us to the law?
Procurement procedures under multiple framework contracts.
What section is that of the Act?
The old Act.
Yes.
Sorry, the new Act, Section 52.
Section 52.
Yes.
Okay. Does it have a corresponding act in 2018? 2018 Act?
It should.
It should have a.
Yes, it should. It's on the procurement methods.
It's not there?
No, I have not seen it under the procurement methods, but I think you allow us time, I'll take note and then I'll get the right, I'll look at it and then.
So you see that the section 52.1 is very clear as to
52.1.
Do you see that? Do you see section 52.1? It is saying that procurement under the multiple framework contract is a simplified competitive procurement procedure to be used for the acquisition of simple routine services, standardized or off-the-shelf goods and simple or low-value works contracts required by procuring organization on a recurrent basis. It's provided for in your law, right?
I didn't.
Yeah?
I don't think I said that it's not provided for.
No, I'm saying that, you know, you were explaining the fact that it's not mandatory, you cannot force them. But I am saying now that this is provided for in the law and it's clearly telling you
that
the kind
is mandatory.
If the law is saying that this is what you are supposed to do,
I think the law is saying that it's being simplified to make life easy for them.
Yes.
So if they don't want to make life and they are not violating the act.
So what does that supposed to mean?
No. As with legal sort of backing and the like, we want to be sure that it is mandatory, given this part of the. So your advice, please, whether it is mandatory.
But the law has already given you, you understand? The law has already clearly stated what should be done under a particular circumstance.
I think
so there is nothing like whether it is mandatory or not.
We have a lot of instances where the law may even use may is provided there, and given the language, it may not be mandatory for at some instances.
Counsel, you can proceed.
Right. Now, please turn to page 13. So this part will probably be just a brush aside because it is just the same general finding. For example, there was no market survey on page 13 conducted by the SPU for the year under review 2019. Do you see that?
Come again?
No market survey for the year under review.
Under which section, what can you?
Page 13. You recommended 13. That the SPU should ensure a periodic market survey is carried out.
Okay, I have seen that. Recommendations. Point 1, the SPU should ensure a periodic market survey is carried out and inform the contrast committee accordingly.
I am saying we have exhaustively discussed the importance of market surveys. If you go to 3.5.0, functions of the evaluation committee, there were no evaluation committees as well. Do you see it?
Correct, yes.
Now, 3.6.0, examination and receipt committee, or better still, inspection and receipt committee.
Correct. You
can't find any in the Janjamburi Area Council. Is that not the case?
Right.
Good. Now, on page 14, the total number and value of procurement methods. Are you there?
Yes.
I don't see a table.
You are right. The table is omitted. I have also observed that.
Yeah, so we would not know how many transactions were done for the year 2019. Can you please get back to us on that when you come back?
Okay.
And Mr. Sanyang, page 14, the citations of the legislations are also wrong. Did you see that?
The same page?
14, the citation, the GPPA rules, 125, etc.
Not under non-compliance.
Yes.
Committee as required by GPPR, yes. Gambia Public Procurement Regulation 125, 127, and 128, yes.
Oh, you can proceed.
Yes, so no table, we know that as far as this report is concerned, the entire procurement transactions, 100% were done through single sourcing. But then how many or what the number is, we don't know. So please avail us with the necessary information.
Okay.
On page 15, record keeping of the procurement activities, 0. The procurement organization were not conducting proper procurement record keeping. So if you look at your findings, we said the SPU should ensure all procurement activities are filed either in procurement method or monthly transactions as dictated in Gambia Public Procurement Authority. But the compliance is said the PO did ensure the procurement activities are filed as per procurement method. Non-compliance, the PO does not maintain a comprehensive and individual file for each procurement activity in contravention of the Act, Section 35. Some of the procurement files reviewed were found to be incomplete and did not have copies of the contracts committee meeting, the goods received notes, acceptance and receipt notes, among others were not attached. So, again, very poor records keeping for the year 2019. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Procurement planning, 3.9.0. If you turn to page 16, you said there was no annual consolidated procurement plan for the period under review.
Yes.
Now, which means where you have the consolidated annual plan, it was not approved by the PO, that is the procurement authority. Is that the meaning?
Yes, meaning the PO is not buying in accordance with what is being, in something that is being planned. They are just buying whatever they want to buy and not plan.
In fact, it appears, I don't even know why they use the word consolidated procurement plan, because there appears to be no plan in the first place. If you look at the second point, there was no annual procurement plan presented to the reviewer under the year under review. So in the first instance, no procurement plan for the year 2019.
Correct.
Which makes all the procurements being done for 2019 to be unlawful, generally. So on page 17, the contracts awarded to non-registered suppliers. Do you see that?
Yes.
But you see, this is the point again. If you look at the list of the number of transactions, and we would not know how many suppliers were awarded contract in the year 2019, will this give us a fair representation of, or a fair understanding of the number of suppliers that did not register with GPA?
No, it cannot give a fair, it cannot be a fair representation.
So you see now why yesterday when I asked the question and time and again, you see, it will be difficult if you have this endless. At some point, it may not be an error anymore by the team of reviewers. Do you understand?
Yes.
It will be difficult to convince anyone that these are just mere errors. In the beginning, we treat them as errors. At some point, That's why I start to call out the names of the reviewers, because at some point it appears as if there is some collusion here and there, because you cannot tell me, with the assumption is anyone else employed in the public service is competent to do a particular job, unless otherwise proven. So for me, if you are competent to do your job and you are seemingly making these basic errors, but then they go deep into the heart of the information you are supposed to put forward for public consumption. And so it appears as if you are trying to bury certain, in law we call it burying evidence. You are trying to bury evidence or destroy evidence, destruction of evidence. This where what it kind of shows, because you cannot mistakenly fail to outline a table which will tell any reader the amount of procurement activity conducted or the number of suppliers dealt with in a particular year. These are just basic things. You can't tell me it's so difficult. If you can review 409 transactions, you can as well, because some of those suppliers will be dealing with the area councils in five occasions, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you will have a number. Why can't you just give us a list of the suppliers for 2019 that a particular institution dealt with? And then through that number, you can again give us another list like this as to how many of those suppliers that you have listed are actually PPA. Now, the reason being, if you want to make it an issue regarding the severity of non-registration, GRA tax clearance, there could be biasness in supply identification. Non-registration with the authority is probable failure to pay tax, since GRA tax clearance is a prerequisite for GPPA registration. A potential loss of revenue to government. The Commission has really hammered on this point as to, in fact, we don't even know the amount of loss. We don't necessarily have to know exactly how much, but you can have a fair understanding as to, okay, fine, they are supposed to, all these 10 suppliers that did not register, ideally would have been paying X, Y, Z. So this is the magnitude of the revenue we are talking about that has been denied by these institutions. They are denying government. And when I say government, I mean the Gambian people. So the small table, 4 suppliers out of these so many suppliers we have been told that did not register, is really representation. Mr. Jete?
Yes, Council. The consistency, the trend, and the magnitude of violations we have seen in the reports prepared by my own institution. And I must say this first, that these are during periods when I was not at the authority. And so anything I say might be considered as if, well, you were not there. But this has happened even during my time. We went through 2022, and this is during my tenure. It happened, so I'm not trying to be any bias here.
No, I understand.
The point is, this is not acceptable. And I really, like I said, this cannot be termed as errors. These are not only errors. This is beyond errors, because some of the staff have been at the institute, at the authority for a long time. They have experience, and this is not really just an error. I agree with you.
Exactly. At some point, it will go beyond a mere error. So now on page 18, no specifications developed. Well, we expect this. In fact, in all the area councils. Reports to GPPA 3.17.0, 0. They don't comply with these things. They don't really respect GPPA, or GPPA is a friend. So some of these, people, like those who conduct these reviews. So we turn to page 19. Value for money. The same old story with the area councils as well. The PO does not undertake market surveys. We have been saying this time and again. Negotiation. At some point we had this discussion, Mr. Sanyang, the importance of negotiation You're using public funds. You want to have value for money, but you also want to spend less if you can to make sure that you just don't pay, let's say, for example, $100,000 to purchase a laptop when you can purchase the same laptop with the same quantity, with the same quality, $100,000 through another dealer. So it's important. Every dollar counts when it comes to public funds. It goes to the right supplier, get the best goods or services, and also, if possible, save some funds for the public. But individuals in their respective offices decide that public funds should be their private businesses. That is what is happening. Now, we spoke about the contracts management. Same old story. You see, at some point you get tired of talking about the very fact that you hardly have a compliance in relation to some basic things. The only one I was seeing was the purchase order, which I thought was used as a scheme to just have a basis for corruption. But at some point they don't even see the need to even release a purchase order or the requisition form, for example, where you even have to stipulate things that are needed, for example. They don't even bother themselves. But in one way or the other, finance directors are making sure monies will be available for whatsoever project. They make sure that you don't even have to fill any form, follow any procedure. If you want $100,000, it will be out. I will make sure it will be out, whether that negotiated or not, who knows. Chapter 4, specific findings. Madam Chair, I will now discuss the specific findings for Janjambure Area Council. Page 20. Page 20, the first one will be the procurement of gas oil. And the amount is $45,486. It's through single source. The compliance findings. Purchase order was raised by the end user department. The procurement method is within the threshold. How is $45,000 within the threshold for single sourcing? Mr. Sayang, is there something I'm missing?
It's wrong, because
it's wrong.
It's not within the threshold.
Good. Now, non-compliance, the procured item is not on the procurement plan. They don't even have a procurement plan in the first place. Procurement documentations were not complete because there was no forms of the authority attached, Form 100, 101, 041. All the forms were not attached. In fact, there was no delivery receipt. There was no inspections committee. There was no evidence of negotiation. Now, $45,000 is being spent on something, 24,000. It appears as if I am growing old, Madam Chairperson. $24,600 from Fortune Shop, that's a contractor, through single source. The procured item was not in the procurement plan. There was no procurement plan, I always say. Purchase order was not raised. Procured documentation such as GPA forms were not attacked. No minutes of the contracts committee. No delivery receipt. The amount, needless to say, the amount is above the threshold. Is that correct? To the requirements of the regulation or the law or the act. Page 22, spare parts, 21,550. Contractor Abdullah Cisse Santayala, through single source. The amount involved is above the threshold of single source. The procured item was not part of the procurement plan. Purchase order was not raised. No minutes, no delivery receipt, no inspections committee. 4.6, procurement of accommodation, $9,000. The procured item is not specified on the procurement plan. Purchase order was not raised. Procurement method is within the threshold. There was no minute of the contracts committee. There was no delivery receipt. The procurement filing was not complete. It is only a receipt that was attached on the payment. I don't know what that means, but then in short, the procuring authority did not abide by the required procedure. So you have a column for other related matters. Do you see that on the last page, 23? Where you were summarizing the procurement conducted for the year 2019 for Janjanbureh Area Council. For the most part, we have discussed all of it, but then the second point, the ward councillors conducting procurement within their wards without the involvement of the procurement officer. So now this one, if the team come across a finding like this on the ground, when you have been told or you realize that through examination of documentation, it comes to your knowledge that apparently there are people outside the procurement unit performing procurement activities within a particular institution. That's just one of it. But when you now go to be more specific to say, in fact, you have councillors conducting procurement activities, then it means there would be evidence of that. Is that not correct? What form of evidence can you imagine as an expert in these conducting these reviews that one may come across to be able to conclude that those that are doing the procurement are in fact councillors?
Well, there must be documentation where the various people involved may have written or probably deliberated, generate minutes and probably signed. Members with indicated that they have not been, firms are not being admitted. But then if they are, the forms must have been completed by various individuals where, with their names probably and signatures appended. So things like that. But then the interview with, because the approach will give the opportunity to the reviewers to have, of course, face-to-face interviews with the procurement officer, and some of these things may be revealed during the interview.
So, again, can you confirm with your team on the ground for the year under review, Mr. Barbos Permendi, I think he was present, and his team, can you confirm with them with respect to the names of the councillors that were involved in procurement in the year 2019 that they came across?
Okay.
And he said here, if we can have that, it will be important. And if possible, the procurement activities that they conducted in the year 2019. Yes.
Yes.
So just to be on the record, Madam Chair, on page 6, before I conclude with respect to the 2019 file, on page 6 we have the total procurement proceedings and their values, where we have 681 transactions at a value of 4,461,699.81. butoots, and there were no requests for quotation for 2019. And the team reviewed all the 681 transactions. So even though this one, they said that Jammeh Area Council were non-compliant, but even to say 45%, I think they were grossly not compliant with regulations. Mr. Sayang.
Well, yes, as observed, there are a lot of non-compliance issues, and we can conclude that they are non-compliance.
Yes.
And the percentage, probably I cannot confirm.
Exactly.
That one is going to be very difficult to establish at this moment.
All right. Thank you very much.
So I have. So it would. We could assume that the random selection of particular procurement activities is not a fair representation of what they have reviewed.
Again, given the total population versus the ones selected, yes.
And we have also seen that repeatedly in this report, it has highlighted the fact that councillors were actively engaged in procurement.
Correct.
And also the report did indicate that there is a possibility of not reporting procurement activities that have been conducted, that there is a possibility of the council not reporting
certain
procurement activities.
Correct, yes.
And is this a recurrent issue with all the other municipalities, given the evidences that you have provided?
If my memory can serve me well, I think it was mentioned in one of the reports that is a probable, there are instances where the true picture of transactions conducted are not being reported.
Yes, because the reason why I asked that it is whether it is not an unfair representation goes to corroborate the fact that there are so many activities that were not reported to the reviewers. Right?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to ask this simple question. Is it that, do you have a set people to go to all of these councils, or do you select, and maybe today it's Congria, tomorrow is as head of the inspection team or review team? Do you change the makeup?
Actually, we don't have people attached to various institutions.
So
we only create teams when it is time to go out for our reviews.
Okay, then that leads me for you to therefore all these errors that we have found, would you say it's a systemic failure? Because since you are changing who the persons are, but we are still having the same results, is it a systemic error?
I would say yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? All right. I have an announcement to make. I wouldn't know whether Friday is a public holiday. If Friday is a public holiday, we will have to do our housekeeping on Thursday. So public sitting may not, we may not be sitting on Thursday. But if, depending on what the circumstance is, what we will communicate to you. Because we normally do our consultations on Friday. And if Friday is a public holiday, we will have to shift it forward. So that is a probable reason why we are saying if it is declared public holiday, we may not sit on Thursday. But in any case, information will be passed on to you to know on due course. All right? Thank you. We may rise.
Thursday.